Rav Atlas unfortunately wasn't able to be here tonight as he's been under the weather, so he apologized for not being able to attend to be here in person. But I just want to take 1 minute just to thank our speaker this evening, Richard Rinberg, who'll be presenting. And I just want to tell Richard, we don't take you for granted, and you should know how much we appreciate. And when you see the turnout and people asking and the interest, people we know that are participating via Zoom, the inspiration and the insights that we all gain from Richard, we owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude. So thank you very much, and b'chavod gadol.
Thank you, Zivi. Because it's been such a traumatic, I would say year, but it's actually longer than that, but it's been a traumatic period, I thought I would come at this subject from a slightly different angle. I'm going to have to watch the time because I have a lot of material. But the main part of this talk is going to be the use of art as a weapon and the battle that happened in the 1930s, the art exhibitions. I will then switch to when the war starts. You can see the opening slides have some pieces of art. Marc Chagall, very well known to everybody. Arthur Sheets, tremendous propagandist, tremendous artist. Jawlensky, quite well known. Hans Christoph at the bottom, not really well known. Most of his work disappeared in the bombing of Dresden. But we'll see how this art was treated by the Third Reich. So my question really, the overarching question is, what was the source of the Nazi appeal to the German masses? And how did a regime that was responsible for war, devastation, and genocide on such a huge scale seduce a civilized nation of almost 68 million people and lead Germany to disaster? Why did people march, salute, follow this man right up until 1945 to complete devastation? So I'd like to start with some classical art. Oh, the lights went on. Is that better for you or worse for you? Because I'm not certain it's good. Worse. It was better before, Perry. Yeah? You don't want to see me, though. You really don't. So I'll leave it to Perry to decide. He's in charge. I'd like to start with some classical art by an Austrian artist, good artist, actually. He was 3 years old and his family moved to Munich, to Germany. And here from 1909, so the artist at this point is about 20. I think pretty good. I mean, I could not do anything even close to this. And here's his work. He was 21, the Old Town Hall in Munich. And you can see a modern picture of that building. And it goes back at least 600 years. I'll move the mic closer to me. Is that better for you? Yeah? Okay, I'm sorry. I try not to get too close, but okay. So it's a 600-year-old building at the time that he drew it. And here you see a picture of the same Old Town Hall in Munich after the Allied had bombed Munich to bits in 1945. And in fact, this building was the place that Joseph Goebbels gave his speech on the 9th of November 1938, which was Kristallnacht. Here's another picture by the same artist. He's 21. The Hofbrauhaus, a beer hall that's built in 16th century. And it was here in 1920 that Hitler presented the Nazi Party's 25-point plan. And then a year later, the brown shirts, the Sturmabteilung, the SA organization, started in this building. Is this okay, the sound? Yeah, good. Well, it's pointless on Zoom without the slides. So it's being fixed. I'm hanging.
Where's the Zoom here? Where's the Zoom here?
You need to be 11.
Huh? Where's the Zoom? Yeah. Okay, where's this? Share. What, the screen or this?
No, the presentation. No, it's the presentation.
This?
Yeah.
No, you put it back.
It's a process issue.
Nature. It's an agent.
He's
Now,
So I'm just going to flick through the slides to where we were so the people on Zoom can see the slides. They can't see me, but that's okay. I can send you a picture. Anybody who wants to see me. So this is the artist. This is the old town hall in Munich. This is Munich after it was bombed, where Goebbels gave his speech at Kristallnacht. This is the beer hall in 1589, where Hitler presented his plan and the brown shirt started. And here's an Austrian, the Baroque church, the Karlskirche, 1912. So the artist is about 23. I think it's very much chocolate box art, but it's very, very well. The detail is excellent. I just wanted to put in one picture that the artist did that shows people, not particularly good, but far, far better than anything I could ever do. It's actually Mary and Son, but that's a different thing. And here in 1914, I am told to stop again.
This is it, right? This what? What are you saying now? Rocco.
I can't. I can't. Are you want to use that each time? Just really don't want to have to use that. Ah, okay. Okay, we seem to be back on. So the artist here is 25. I'm getting to that. The artist is 25, and you can see it's Mad King Ludwig's castle. Again, beautifully observed by the artist. And here, I think one of the last things before the First World War, the old residency in Munich, and that was the home of the Bavarian monarchs for about 500 years from 1385. So here's the artist. I put the arrow pointing to him. He served in the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment in the Great War. Obviously, today we call it the First World War. Perhaps you recognize the artist or not. All of those drawings were by a particular artist who, after the First World War, sketched this, the Triumphal Arch. He sketched this in 1925. He's 36, and it's a memorial to the German fallen. There are over 1 million people, so the arch is absolutely huge. It's 380 feet high. That little black line on the right are people, right? It's to scale. And here he is. I actually obscured his signature of A. Hitler on each of those drawings. This is Adolf Hitler as an artist. And in fact, in his 1925 autobiography, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, he described how in his youth he wanted to become a professional artist, but his dreams were ruined because he failed the entrance exam to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And he was actually rejected twice in 1907, 1908. But I have to tell you that although generally in textbooks you see that he was a failed artist, he was a lousy artist, when he failed, he was told to reapply for the architectural drawing section, and he would have easily got in because very well observed. His problem was with people. And we know from his personality, he has a problem with people, but he created about 2,000 to 3,000 drawings. A lot of them are with the American army, basically in storage, and very, very difficult to ever get to see them. And you rarely see them reproduced because people feel this is really art that should not be viewed. But I wanted you to see there's a real person there. Obviously what he becomes, but had he become an artist, maybe the 20th century would have been a completely different place. In fact, here he is with the red arrow looking at his triumphal arch, a model of it. And beneath it, I've shown the Arc de Triomphe in scale. It would fit underneath the arch. And in fact, last week, Donald Trump's triumphal arch, if you saw that in the paper, which is they want to build in Washington, D.C. to be 250 feet high. Had Donald Trump been here tonight, he would immediately increase it to more than 380 feet, but it was not going to be the biggest. But in fact, to be able to build it, the architect said, look, Berlin is not on solid ground. It's not like New York, right? So they had to like Manhattan, they had to try out this heavy load exerting body, the Schwerbelastungskörper, and they built this concrete cylinder to be one of the supports, one of the 4 supports they planned for this arch. It goes 60 feet into the ground. It's 36 feet across underground. On top of the ground, it's 46 feet high, almost 50 feet high, 69 feet, and it weighs nearly 13,000 tons. So, of course, after the war is finished, the only way you could get rid of it is by blowing it up. And of course, people live near there and there are trains and such like. So they've left it. You can go there today and see it. So here's Mein Kampf, my struggle in 1925. They sell approximately 12.5 million copies of this book. Virtually nobody reads it. In German, it's really badly written and difficult to read. You can read it on the internet for free. But he gets royalties. And in today's money, I worked out it's something like $70 million that he makes from this book. So actually, he becomes very, very wealthy, and he can indulge himself in buying these Mercedes cars that you always see him driving in. A couple of quotes from Mein Kampf relevant to tonight. One, all the human culture, all the results of art, science, and technology that we see before us today are almost exclusively the product of the Aryan. If we were to divide mankind into 3 groups, the founders of the culture, the bearers of culture, the destroyers of culture, only the Aryan could be considered as the representative of the first group. And 2, culturally, the Jews contaminate art, literature, the theater, makes a mockery of natural feeling, overthrows all concepts of beauty and sublimity, of the noble and the good, and instead drags man down into the sphere of his own base nature. Unfortunately, this is the sort of thing that you can almost read in the papers today around the world. It's just very, very quickly, Hitler's rise to power. Following the Great War, World War I, Germany had the Weimar Republic, and there's huge unrest, a lot of fighting in the streets, there's financial instability, 30% unemployment just after the First World War. So more and more people are going to vote for a party that can bring order, typical right wing versus left wing. And in 1932, the party gains 1/3 of the seats in the Reichstag. It's the largest individual party in the Reichstag. In fact, before the First World War, women didn't have the vote. After the First World War, the Weimar Republic, women now have the vote. They've got suffrage. And more women would like, talking of the time, their husbands to have a job, their sons to have a job, bring money into the family, food. They needed food. So more and more people are going to vote for the Nazi party. And by the 30th of January, 1933, President von Hindenburg will appoint him Chancellor of Germany, hoping they can control him. In less than a month before the end of February, the Reichstag burns down. I'm absolutely convinced it was the Nazis, but it's possible it was somebody else. But there's a trial which is complete travesty. You can see that the accused, this young man who's a communist, was drugged. By the way, less than a month later, Dachau was set up, the first concentration camp in Germany. And then 24th of March, Hitler's party now has 75% of the vote. How did they do that? Well, you just arrest, for example, 80-odd members of the Communist Party and put them into Dachau, and they've waived habeas corpus, this idea when you arrest somebody, you have 24 hours to charge them or you have to let them go. And they just keep on arresting politicians till your party has 75%. And under the Weimar Constitution, there's an emergency piece of legislation, the Enabling Act, and it enables Hitler alone as chancellor to pass any law he wants. So in fact, he was appointed at the end of January, and by the end of March, democracy actually died in Germany quite legally. Everything that happens in Nazi Germany is legal under the German constitution. And in fact, less than a year later, Hindenburg is going to die. He actually died on the 2nd of August, 34, but they backdate a law 1 day, so he was still alive, folding everything from the presidency into the chancellor. So Hitler is now the complete leader of Germany. He's the Führer. He's the leader everyone's going to follow. 1933, when Hitler comes to power, he's an architect, he's an artist, and he's very interested in art, and he wants to build the House of German Art. And here his favorite architect, Paul Ludwig Troost, and here's a picture of him meeting Troost. And with him on his right is Adolf Wagner, who is going to be a Gauleiter. A Gau is like a shire in England. It's a district. There's approximately 40 different Gau in Germany, 40 different districts. He's going to be the district leader for the Munich area. The one person you don't see in this photograph is, of course, the photographer, who I put top right, Heinrich Hoffmann, who became Hitler's personal photographer and basically curates how Hitler is seen in public and creates the image. One could give a talk just on Heinrich Hoffmann. I've also put in top left Gerdy Troost, who is Paul Troost's wife. She is also an architect. She trained and went to work under Paul Troost. Obviously, there's a romantic attachment. She's appreciably younger, 26 years younger than her husband. She marries him. And you can see 1935, oh, he's going to die next year. He obviously doesn't know that. And she takes over, and she's the one who's going to be the architect that keeps this going. And October 33, remember Hitler came to power in January, October, they're already laying the foundation stone. And you can see this is a national tekes. I'm losing my English. A ceremony. Thank you. I'm losing my English. Wow. This is a national ceremony with all the pomp and circumstance you can bring into it just for laying the foundation stone. And here in June 35, you've got the topping out ceremony where the roof goes on. You can see people right along the roof and also very high up on the scaffolding. And I want to show you this because you'll see this gentleman a number of times. August von Fink, who I doubt anybody here has actually heard of. He lives till 1980. He's August von Fink Senior because there is a junior. He's one of Germany's most influential bankers, and he becomes Hitler's personal banker. And he was described as the richest and stingiest man in Bavaria. And his father founded the insurance giant Allianz, today worth about $150 billion. And also Munich Re, a reinsurance company. It's worth about 80 billion. Basically, August von Fink, and we'll see him again, he ends up in Switzerland, and his son and family, the latest worth I saw on Google, if it's correct, is something like $8.5 billion. He's a promoter, a friend, a supporter of Hitler, is never brought to account at all. He's missing from the Nuremberg trials. June 35, the topping out ceremony. Here you see Hitler in the center with August von Fink next to him. And here's a tour before the building was opened in May 37. And you can see the banker behind Hitler. You can see Gerdy Troost, who's now taken over. She and Hitler have a very close relationship. He really listened to her on matters architectural and artistic. Adolf Ziegler, who we'll see again, who's very involved in art in the Third Reich, and of course Goebbels, the Minister for Propaganda, and in German, and Public Enlightenment. That's his title, how people should think. So the building actually opens on the 18th of July, 1937 on a Sunday, and it's intended to impress everybody and educate them aesthetically in the spirit of the Nazi state. The stone on the facing the building hides the steel skeleton. This is very modern construction. It's got 3 elevators. It's got a state-of-the-art lighting system. It's got a radio room for transmission. It's got combined heating and air conditioning. It's got an air raid shelter. It's got, for a building that's built in these years, this is really ahead of its time. It's still there today, by the way, and you can see in 2014 at the bottom. And it's a rare example. You can actually see something Nazi. Most Nazi buildings have been destroyed, but if you stand under the columns, as it were, and you look up, you can see that design there has actually got the swastika as its central part, and there were stamps published. Let's have a closer look at the 2014 building, because there was an art exhibition, and you can read at the top, all right, these words in Yiddish, right? Which are all basically Yiddish insults going from not so bad to sort of worse as you go along. I've used some of the ones at the beginning, but I've never used the ones at the end. Where does this come from? It actually comes from Mel Bochner, an artist in America who died last year. And if you go to the museum in New York, the Jewish Museum, you'll see his picture on the left there, The Joys of Yiddish by Mel Bochner, which is basically insults. And he got the idea from Leo Rostan's book that I would guess virtually everybody has either seen, purchased, read, whatever, this collection of The Joys of Yiddish. There were different views on this. On the top left, a German museum aimed to honor Jewish wit. The result is downright demeaning, right? The Haus der Kunst, the House of Art in Munich, now has Yiddish insults mounted on its corners. And in fact, according to their website, the idea of this word chain was to convey a particular humor that survived the Nazi regime despite all the odds. And the color scheme of yellow on black was meant to evoke the yellow star. So different people had different views on this. But let's get back to the opening of this exhibition. The aim of it was to display Nazi-approved German art, right, including oil paintings, sculptures, watercolors, engravings, and photographs. And it attracted about 400,000 people. That's about 4,000 people a day for 100 days. And here we've got the boss arriving, as it were, at the House of Art. I have at home the catalogue from 37. You'll see some things. You see the blue star and the red star. You'll see the blue star, we'll see him again, is Adolf Wagner, the Gauleiter, and the right star is Hitler's banker, von Fink. And this is the main hall where Hitler's going to give a speech. And here's the front row of that speech. And you can see August von Fink, who's now the curator of the House of German Art as well. Keep your banker close. And Adolf Wagner on the other side, the Gauleiter of Munich, also an interior minister of Bavaria through most of the Reich. But I want to look at the other people in the front row. It's a who's who of the Nuremberg trials. The Hermann Goering, right? President of the Reichstag, and these are the amounts they served, not their birth and death dates. Then next to him, Rudolf Hess, who flew to England in 41, could do a whole story on that. The foreign minister at the time, von Neurath, who gets replaced before the war starts proper. Werner von Blomberg, the minister of war, who also gets replaced. Magda and Joseph Goebbels, who I think are very well known. Next to him, Adolf Ziegler, who we saw before, who's president of the Chamber of Art, was actually involved in picking the pieces of art, of going through the museums and taking out the pieces of art. And he's talking to Gerdy Troost, the architect we saw before. What's interesting to me is that front row, virtually everybody by the Nuremberg trials is either on trial or is dead, except the banker, who's in Switzerland by then with all his money. Behind Joseph Goebbels is Alfred Rosenberg, who was the famous Nazi theorist. And he and Goebbels, Rosenberg and Goebbels, have a battle, as it were, for cultural policy. And we'll see him again. So here's a plan from the catalogue showing the building itself and the central hall. Hitler speaks for almost 2 hours on art. Basically settling accounts with the modern age, which he didn't like. And he announces an implacable war of cleansing the art that he thinks is terrible, degenerate out of Germany. So the Nazi definition of art restricted it to Aryan art, celebrating classical beauty, racial purity, physical strength, and the heroic nature of Germans. And in his speech, he explains that German art is based on race, according to the Nazi definition, and points out that in future only the accepted art will be allowed in public. And to quote him, from now on, we will conduct a ceaseless war of purification. All the artistic frauds who support each other are removed and eliminated. For our sake, let those prehistoric Stone Age cultures return to the caves of their ancestors to put their primitive international scribbles. And this is his opening speech. There's a Brecker, a typical Nazi art in front, you can see. And here he is in July 37, a lot of photography, walking through the exhibition. He's got Goebbels next to him. He's got his banker on his left. This is interesting because it's a portrait by Heinrich Kneer, which is in the exhibition. And it's best known because this artist, who is shown in the photograph, is the only artist known to have painted him from life. Everybody else does it from photographs. He's the only one who did one from life. Here we are back in the exhibition, having a quick walkthrough. This is from the catalogue. It's got various pictures of the principal Nazis. So you've got here on the right the picture of Rudolf Hess, and Hess here on the left. Here we've got the dignitaries walking through, the military, the Foreign Office. I put this in. This is also in the catalogue because this Field Marshal von Mackensen, you can see the death's head on his hat. This is not something that was new to the Nazis. This was in Germany before from the Hussars. He was king of the Hussars. Again, everything in Nazi Germany, there is nothing in Nazi Germany that is new, that is unique. All they ever do is pick up on stuff that's gone before. I think it's an important principle. Again, in the exhibition, and some of the paintings, this is an Adolf Wissel painting, the young farmers showing the Deutsche Volk, right? And in fact, there's a famous Wissel painting, although it was done later than the exhibition, but I wanted to put it in because Hitler actually buys this painting. He likes it very much. The New York Magazine of 1945, I put in a quote there, they like this painting to some of Grant Wood's, right? The American Gothic painting. What's fascinating about this painting, when you look at it, would you hang this in your lounge? Because the more you look at this painting, and this is done in 38, these people are not happy. They look deeply troubled. And in fact, some art theorists say the horse almost represents the cavalry of marching German armies. You can see the doll by the girl is lying sort of on the floor, and nobody in this family is looking at anybody else. It's just a depressing picture. Hitler likes this picture. So from a psychiatric point of view, I'm sure somebody could do a very nice master's thesis on this, on what he liked and showing his character just by this painting alone. So back to the exhibition, you can see a portrait of Hitler along with some of the classical art showing their army, the strength of their army, whether you're a flyer, whether you're a soldier on the ground, or whether you're a sailor on the high seas. Woodcuts, the marching stormtroopers. And again, something like this, you look at this, it's actually a very, very unfriendly bird when I look at this. It's interesting. The more you look at it, the less I like it. I mean, it's very well observed and very well made, but it's a very nasty piece of art. So this art exhibition was actually held 8 times between 37 and 44. In Munich, and Goebbels spoke at the opening of later exhibitions. Here he is in 1940 exhibition, and there are postcards every year. I've done one, the Tag der Deutschen Kunst, the day of German art, and a day later they're going to hold a pageant, a parade, and I put in a quote by Juvenal, right, nearly 2,000 years before, give them bread and circuses and they'll never revolt. Everybody knows this bread and circuses quote, and they're giving him the circuses. They're giving the German people the circuses, showing this parade, which is going to go through Munich. And this is going to be quite an impressive parade. Flag bearers, it's 3 kilometers long, right? And it goes through the history of Germany as they wish to tell it, right? With all these people in costume, with horses. This looks like something out of an opera. Valhalla with the helmets and such like. You can see the design on the material is again this swastika design at the center. You've got 26 chariots, you've got 5,000 costumes, you've got 450 riders, and of course the Nazi flag everywhere and Nazi officials. You can see there's a Nazi in the middle photographing this as they go by. With all sorts of floats. I could have brought you many, many more photos. I tried to limit it because I'm looking at the time all the time. Mercedes car, which they like. And here you see the central design of the catalog is taken from this, which I haven't bothered to spend too much time on it, whether it's a Greek soldier or a soldier of Troy, but obviously from ancient times. And they're trying to draw this line to the modern great Germany of today. And a postcard from the time showing another float. For kids, they had little model figures. This went through auction a year or 2 ago. You could buy models and play with them. So a day after that, another exhibition opens in Munich, and it's the Entartete Kunst, the degenerate art exhibition. And the idea of that was that it was the other side of the coin. You had the art that was allowed and good, and you had the art that was bad and forbidden. And this is the catalogue. I much to my wife's chagrin, I have a lot of stuff to do with this. This is the catalogue of the forbidden art, the degenerate art exhibition. And you can see the word art in German. Kunst is actually done in crayon on the catalogue and in inverted commas, because it's not really art from the Nazi point of view. And the entrance ticket, actually, that was in Berlin. This exhibition is going to move around quite a bit. And where does the idea of degenerate art come from? One of the great ironies of the world, it actually comes from Max Nordau, our Max Nordau. And here's a picture of him next to Herzl, who's sitting next to Sokolov, next to Wolfson. These are all roads in Israel today. And Max Nordau wrote this book, actually in 1892 in German, and I have an English copy from 3 years later, called Degeneration. He's a doctor, Max Nordau. He actually married a non-Jewish wife, so his daughter, Maxa Nordau, is non-Jewish, but there's a reason why you don't hear too much about Nordau at all. You hear the others quoted, but you hear very, very little about Nordau. But he wrote this book, Degeneration, which is a thick book, very Victorian in the way it's sort of put together. But basically, he's the first major theorist. He's the son of a rabbi, a Budapest rabbi, hence his connection with Herzl, co-founder of the World Zionist Organization. And he argues that the degeneration of society was not unlike a mental illness caused by rapid changes to modern civilization. If anybody remembers Alvin Toffler, the author of Future Shock, it's a similar sort of idea that if change is too fast, human beings can't cope. And city dwellers especially were flawed. They're a human type fated to perish. It's really only the farmer and the good folk from the country who are going to last. And likewise, modern art and literature were sick and degenerate. And the modernistic idea of artistic genius was the praise of highly gifted degenerates. And modern art and culture were infected by a disease. And we stand now in the midst of a severe mental epidemic, a sort of black death of degeneration and hysteria. These are straight quotes from him. By the way, Max Nordau was actually born Simcha Südfeld, right? Simon Maximilian Südfeld. And he changed his name from Südfeld, right? South field, to north, right? He's switching over because Dow Meadow to North Meadow. So he did that on purpose, right? It's quite interesting. In 1926, they bring his remains to Israel. He's in the Trumpeldor ceremony. But amazing that one of our founders, as it were, is involved in this. And here's a quote from Mein Kampf. He states that modern art was the villain. It stood for decadence, internationalism, Jewishness, homosexuality, Bolshevism, right? Communism, big city capitalism. So long as the characteristic features of the cities of our day, the outstanding points that catch our eyes are whorehouses, bazaars, hotels, offices in the form of skyscrapers, there can be no talk of art or any real culture. So there is a battle going on between Albert Rosenberg, who we saw before sitting behind Joseph Goebbels, and some quotes from Goebbels. He says, "We National Socialists are not unmodern. We are the carrier of a new modernity, not only in politics and in social matters, but also in art and intellectual matters." And Joseph Goebbels, again, the art for the National Socialist state, a public exercise. They are not only aesthetic, but also moral in nature. And the public interest demands not only police suppression, but also guidance, right? Basically, we are going to show you the right way, and we're going to ban anything that is the wrong way. Rosenberg actually writes a book, The Myth of the 20th Century. I'll leave that for you to go away and find and read. He's the head of the Office of Foreign Affairs, and the Amt Rosenberg, whenever you see these articles about stolen art, the ERR is basically Rosenberg, that he was the one sort of stealing all this stuff. So let's look at the degenerate art exhibition. The front cover is actually a face looking upwards. The New Man, Der Neue Mensch, it's by a man called Otto Freundlich, Jewish artist. This is a plaster cast that was 4.5 feet high. It's disappeared, probably destroyed during the war. We just don't know where it is. And Otto Freundlich himself on the left, he ends up in Majdanek and dies, unfortunately, in 1943. And here's the opening of that exhibition, the Ausstellung, the exhibition of degenerate art, Eintritt frei. You can come in for free. They don't charge for that. So in June 1937, Goebbels instructed Adolf Ziegler. You remember that fellow on the left who was talking to the architect in the front row, the president of the Reich Chamber of Fine Arts, to scour all the German museums for anything he considered degenerate. 16,000 works of art are taken from the museums. 650 are sent to Munich for this exhibition. In fact, the art exhibition, Degenerate Art, is probably the most popular art exhibition that there has ever been. 2 million people will visit it in Munich, 15,000 a day, and 3 million will visit it when it moves around in its 4-year tour. For some people, it was the last chance they felt they would be able to see some of this avant-garde art. So it's incredibly popular. I put a picture of Adolf Sickler at the bottom from the front row. A lot of the art is the valuable art is sent to Switzerland and is auctioned off in Lucerne. There's a very famous auction. That Van Gogh portrait, which ends up in Boston in America today, was sold at that auction for 175,000 francs. It was the most expensive one. I mean, you're talking 1939. That was a lot of money. Some of the art is burned. A lot of the art sort of disappears. Talking generally, there's one academic who believes approximately 600,000 pieces of art disappeared during the Second World War, and about 500,000 have been recovered, but 100,000 are still missing in action. So where did it take place? In fact, at this Institute of Archaeology in the Hofgarten in Munich. And it has 112 artists who are taken, but only 6 of them were Jewish. I know there's this idea that degenerate art was all Jewish. Only 6 of those artists were Jewish, including Chagall. Interesting. And that venue was chosen because it was really a very bad exhibition hall. It was narrow, it was dark, and they want that. And they put slogans all over the place. And you climb up the stairs, and the first thing you see is this crucifix by Ludwig Gies, which actually originally was put in the Lübeck Cathedral. It was really seen by the Christians as something they really didn't like. You can see these 1921 comments. It's Bolshevik, it's communist culture, it's overexpressionist. And in fact, within a year that it's up, somebody cuts the head off. They throw the head in the water outside the cathedral. And when they come in and they actually found the head and they put it together, but they put it in a museum. They took it out of the church, but it's going to end up in this exhibition. And at the beneath the feet of the carving, you've got this horror hung as a war memorial in the Cathedral of Lübeck. It's meant to show the First World War and obviously what happened to the soldiers. Here's another one. What does that mean? Painted witchcraft. And the next one, carved pamphlets. It doesn't really translate too well in English. These are carvings, but they're used to explain something the same way a pamphlet explains something to you, hence the carved pamphlets, and revelations of German religiosity. And beneath it is quite a famous painting by Emil Nolde, The Crucifixion. We'll see more of his, and that's his painting. You can see it's pretty avant-garde, very, very colorful. Very, very unlike, shall we say, the more classical art of a 16th century Mantegna, right? Very, very different. And in fact, there's going to be an exhibition in 2019. An academic at Cambridge University in London works out that actually Emil Nolde, for years and years and years, had hid behind the idea that he was in the Degenerate Arts exhibition and therefore he was okay, as it were, as a person. But in fact, he was highly anti-Semitic because they finally got agreement to see all his personal correspondence, which was hidden in a trust, and they wouldn't let anyone see it for a long time. He was a member of the Nazi Party, and he was always of that view. So you can say, how could he possibly be like that when his art was considered degenerate? He said, I'm brilliant and I'm ahead of my time. So even though today the Nazis say that my work is no good, over time they'll become to understand that actually it's ahead of its time and it's wonderful. So he maintained himself as a Nazi, even though his work was put in this exhibition. And unlike most artists, I mean, if you were a degenerate artist, you weren't actually allowed to produce any art in Germany, but he was allowed to produce drawings, not oils, during the period of the Nazi Reich. And in fact, after this exhibition, 2019, Angela Merkel, her favorite artist was Nolde, she had 2 of his pictures in her private office. This is one of them in front of it. She removed them. And that, of course, created a whole debate in Germany as well. So I've written above it what it says in German. Take data seriously, it's worth it. when Hitler visits this. And you've got the paintings, Kandinsky, Klee, Schwitters, they've all been hung at different angles. What they want to do, obviously, is show how much they think this art is worthless. Let's carry on. They say to themselves, this is written on the wall. You can see just the manifest from the Bolshevik Manifesto of 1915. It's written, we act as if we were painters, poets, or whatever, but what we are simply and ecstatically impudent. In our impudence, we take the world for a ride and train snobs to lick our boots. And here's the same more as they go through and they see this art. So says the world. These are masterworks, right? And you see this painting at the back here. It's one of the one with the arrow. It's lost now. The Beach on the Lido by Max Beckmann, who ends up in New York. That's his wife on the left in the oil, and it's his wife actually on the left in the painting as well. And the painting, the newspaper is actually Il Popolo di Roma, which was an anti-fascist newspaper. There's a long article on the internet saying it was a fascist newspaper. It wasn't. It was an anti-fascist newspaper, which is why this art was considered no good, because he's showing that newspaper. Reminds me of a certain book about Jewish tzaddikim, but they were reading the daily paper and that was forbidden, so they had to change the book. Another story. Max Beckmann, many people know this painting, although this is 1919 of the synagogue in Frankfurt am Main. I've put some photographs there, you can see it. And this is what happens to that synagogue on Kristallnacht, 10th of November, it's burnt down. So we're back in the exhibition. And here, this is from the catalogue. Look at that top right painting, which I put here. You can see it's condemning what happened to people in the First World War, the terrible injuries and the people that came back to Germany. Just terrible. The War Cripples by Otto Dix. And there's also a degenerate music exhibition. And Dr. Hans Severus Ziegler is nothing to do with the other Dr. Ziegler. They're not related. They're different people. But there is one about degenerate music. And you can see the imagery. I needn't describe to you, what's going on here. And on the left, one of the degenerate art exhibition posters from Hamburg. And there's another exhibition. They love exhibitions. This is all before the war. And this is the Eternal Jew exhibition. This anti-Semitic exhibition at the library of the German Museum in Munich. And you've got photographs, caricatures, we'll see a bit of that. And you've got this Ostjuden, the kaftan-wearing Eastern Jew holding gold coins. Jews are all about money. It's communism, right? You've got the hammer and sickle. He's got a whip. And this is going to have about 5,000 people per day visiting. That's near the train station, the main train station. You can see an advertisement for it. Here's the building itself. And you can see it's quite popular, especially a lot of military here. And along the top of each of these posters on the wall, you can see the word Juden again and again. It's all about Jews and obviously nothing positive. And this is from yet another catalogue I have at home of the Eternal Jew. And on the inside of the front cover, you can see this picture, the pure blood, right? Das reine Blut, the pure blood of the ancestors. And look at the German mother at the bottom. She's being crowned, as it were, right? They wanted to elevate the German woman. Why? Because she was going to produce many children, so they'd have many soldiers. And the quote on the front page, which I've translated, there's no pact with the Jews, only a hard either or. That's a Hitler quote. And the back page has this, the German mother again, and this little angelic figure is crowning the German mother. And there's a Hitler Youth there with the swastika. And inside you've got this, the art dealer Alfred Flechtheim. And again, there's a famous portrait by Otto Dix. And you can see it in the picture and also the real one, 1926. And at the bottom, it says a grain handler dictated the art form. Originally, Alfred Flechtheim, who became a very well-known art dealer, he went into the family business of grain. So he was a grain merchant and then became an art dealer. And that's why they're doing that. And something else from inside the exhibition, on the poster closest to us on the left, you can see this puppet because the Jews are controlling Austria. And at the bottom, it says, Jews, the rulers of German Austria. And they're showing how the Jews are in control of everything. And for me, quite a chilling part of that exhibition to do with Freemasonry. This is from a quote from the People's Observer, the Völkische Beobachter. And finally, we see how Judaism has also created an instrument for realizing its plans for world domination in Freemasonry. One room displays the furnishings of a Freemason lodge. Symbols and customs here are Jewish in origin. And clearly, it's something to give you nightmares, the way they put it together. So what's the response to all these exhibitions in Germany? Well, there's going to be a response in London at the Burlington Gallery. Some people get together and they say, we should have an exhibition of these artists who are good artists. And we're going to take the German artists, many of whom actually end up in London. They've got out during the 30s and they come to England, and we'll have our own exhibition. And on the front cover, you've got this Franz Marc painting, and you've got a picture of it in the exhibition that you can see. And you can see the President Augustus John, who's very famous in the UK, and the patrons. If you go down those names, you could talk about every one of them, but Le Corbusier, the architect, and towards the bottom, Picasso, Jean Renoir, H.G. Wells, Virginia Woolf. And in fact, at the opening, you've got Virginia Woolf, Pablo Picasso, Le Corbusier, and Paul Robeson, the American singer, who is a fierce anti-fascist activist. Actually, he's a communist. And if you go online, you can see the FBI file and go through it for Paul Robeson. It's quite thick. And the idea of that was to rehabilitate and promote the artists who the Nazis were condemning. And they sent a clear message: what Germany considers to be degenerate art is believed to be a part of the modern art mainstream in Western Europe. And here is the art we saw before, right on the cover, the Franz Marc. And it really is, could talk about that. It's just a lovely piece of work. Franz Marc is a German painter, one of the key figures of German Expressionism. He's a founding member of Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider, and it's a journal whose name became synonymous with there. And I put one of the journals with the Kandinsky painting on the front. His mature works mostly are animals, known for bright colors. Each color has a meaning. He was drafted to serve in the German army at the beginning of World War I and died 2 years later at the Battle of Verdun. In 1936, the Nazis named him a degenerate art as part of their suppression of modern art. I wanted to go into this because of the history just for 2 minutes. There's another Franz Marc, The Foxes, because this Jewish banker, Kurt Gravy, purchased this painting in 1928. And then with Nazi Germany coming up, his business gets Aryanized, transferred to non-Jewish owners, obviously at a very, very low value. And he's forced to sell his art collection at the Jew auction in Berlin in 1937. Jew auction in inverted commas, obviously. But on Kristallnacht, he's sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, and he's released as many. They arrested 20 to 24,000 Jews after Kristallnacht, but they couldn't cope with the numbers. So they said, we'll release you, but you have to sign here that you and your family are going to leave Germany within the next 3 weeks. And you're only allowed to take $10 with you, 10 Reichsmarks. Everything else is blocked and you'll get it later. You never get it later. It's absorbed by the German government. So he leaves, but he manages to smuggle out this painting, The Foxes, and get it to New York. But he has nothing else. So it's actually put up for auction in 1940 because this is going to fund their life in America. It's bought by a German businessman in 1961 and donated to Dusseldorf to the art exhibition. And then in 2017, Gravy's family want it restituted. It's interesting because it was sold in New York and he was a free man in New York. Surely he sold it under his, right? He was free, except he couldn't take any other money out. And therefore, was he actually under compulsion from the Nazis? In fact, the New York court considered it was made under duress. It was one of the fundamental cases to do with this. Of course, the Germans didn't like this, right? And they didn't really want to give it back. But in January 2022, the work goes back to the Graviers and they sell it for 42 million sterling. Right? It's like $60 million more. An interesting case of art. This is back in the English exhibition, and that's the Beckman that we saw in the middle there to do with temptation. You've got the artist in the center being tempted. You've got a soldier of old, of classical times. You've got in that, it's a triptych, which a triptych is often a Christian religious piece of art, and he's obviously changing it into something completely different. So on the left, you've also got a woman who's bound to a spear. She's obviously a prisoner. There's obviously an element of temptation there. The artist and his model, there's temptation. And you've got on the right more modern. In fact, round that bellboy, the bellhop's cap, it does say, you can read it, Kempinski. Think of the Kempinski in Tel Aviv. It's carrying a crown and such like, and a lady on the ground, but we're in shul. I'm not going to go into this too much. Hitler attacks the idea of this London art exhibition. So you've got quotes here in 38 from the News Chronicle. Herr Hitler complained of the impertinence of a London exhibition of pre-Nazi German artists, which he likened to the staging of the opposition to the Reichstag fire trial. The Reichstag, obviously, it was a setup, the whole trial, and people commented on that. And on the left, modern art has no place in nationalist socialist Germany. He intimated that modern artists who had not yet left Germany should do so now. So it's their advert, go and see it, right? The more something is banned, the more people want to see it. So that's before the war, before 39. Just the battle that's going on to do with the soul of Germany, if you want. But it having been Yom Hashoa, just, obviously yesterday now, but I thought I should deal with something to do with when the war has taken place and what happened. And in the remaining minutes, I want to deal with that and come at it from slightly different angle to normal, and also show how modern tools can be used and how quite remarkable what can be done with research even today, 80 years on. So this comes from an academic, Christoph Dickmann, Dr. Dickmann at Yad Vashem, and he's talking about the victims of Nazi crimes, but someone who's a murder victim. So if a soldier is in a battle, he's not murdered by the other side, he dies in battle. But if you take out a civilian and you shoot them or you hang them, that is murder. What happened to the Jews was murder for virtually all of it. 6 million Jews were murdered. Soviet prisoners of war, they were starved after they'd surrendered or they were captured, and often they died. The chance of coming back if you were a Soviet soldier was very, very little once you'd been captured. 3 million of them die. Soviet civilians will die within their borders, ethnic Polish civilians. Forced labor will kill 500,000 people out of 13 million. Yugoslavian civilians, and so on. Euthanasia in Germany, the T4 program, where they were killing off people who were invalids, whatever, mental problems, and all the way down. You've got approximately 13.5 million people who in a court of law would have been considered murder victims under the Nazis in this period from 33 to 45. But we're going to deal just with the Jews, the 6 million Jews. So the Nazi regime came to power in 33. You've got a picture there on the left when Hitler becomes chancellor, and it surrenders in May 1945. So you've got approximately 12 years that the 1,000-year Reich, right, was meant to last. It lasts 12 years. So you think 6 million people over 12 years, that's 500,000 people per year will die. And in a sense, in our minds, that's how we see it, which is not right at all. Look at this. Until World War II actually begins, 1st of September 1939, the Nazis were going to kill or have killed less than 10,000 people. I'm not saying that isn't terrible. 10,000 people is a large number, but it's nowhere near the millions that are going to die from murder, just plain murder. So until World War II begins, there's less than 10,000 have been murdered. And then we go to Germany invading Poland, and we'll go all the way up till June 41 when Germany invades Russia, Operation Barbarossa on the 22nd of June 1941. And until that invasion happens, they're breaking the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the non-aggression pact. Until that happens, there are another 200,000 who've been murdered in Poland mainly and around there. And then Germany invades the Soviet Union. You've got the Einsatzgruppen who are going around behind the soldiers who are pushing forward into Russia, and they're just murdering whatever they can find, especially any Jew. In fact, to begin with, it was only Jewish men between the ages of 18 and 40, military age. And then after about a week, they decide any Jew is an enemy of the Reich, and they were killing everything and anybody, whether you were 6 months old, whether you were 80 years old, didn't matter, you would be killed. And so after Barbarossa, but before the spring of 1942, another 300,000 people will be murdered, right? So it's grown 20-fold till Barbarossa, and then another 15-fold until the spring of 42. And what happens in 42? 3 million. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 3 million. Yeah, the Einsatzgruppen are probably going to murder something like 2 million Jews, the Holocaust by bullets, one person, one bullet, as they're roaming around. It's including Babi Yar in 2 days, 33,771 Jews will die. The whole of the population of Kiev, just about, is put into Babi Yar. So until the deportations start, there's about 3 million murders. And then all the way to the end of the war, you can add another 10 million. So once the deportations, the extermination camps to, we know the names, but like Auschwitz, you've got approximately 3 million Jews who are going to be put on trains, taken to places like Auschwitz and such like, and murdered. So really what I'm showing here is how the numbers ramp up. It starts relatively small, but then like COVID or an exponential, it goes up very, very fast. What do we learn from this? That you've got to stop things when they're small. You can't allow it to grow because it grows very, very fast, right? So most of the murder of the Second World War, most of the death toll happened in the last 3 years of the 12-year Reich. Something to think about. So to finish off, I want to talk about this photograph. It's a very, very famous photograph. It's called The Last Jew in Vinitsa of 1941. You'll see it in Yad Vashem. You'll see it in virtually any book of the Holocaust to do with the murdering taking place. This is not at midnight. The man with the pistol, the German with the pistol, is not doing this behind the barn door where no one can see him. There are people standing around. You've got the pit with, unfortunately, bodies in the pit, and he has maybe seconds to live. And this photograph, was used actually in the Adolf Eichmann trial, and it was found in the top pocket of a German soldier. There are a few copies of it that German soldiers had. They used to like to trade their photographs of, what did I do in the war and such like. But this particular one had The Last Jew of Vinitsa written on the back. So it was taken to be in a place called Vinitsa in the Ukraine, we'll see. We don't know who the soldier was. We don't know who the victim is, don't know whether he was Jewish, whether the people in the fit know very little about it. There's Vinitsa, you can see on the map. And then they came up in, and we'll see where, with a negative of the original. And here is a print from that negative. And there's, in the background, there's a lot more that you can see that you couldn't see in the other copies, right? And so this is only a few years ago that the academics you'll see. So this was found in the war diary of a Wehrmacht officer named Walter Materna. And in his diary, he describes the events of July 28, 1941. So we've got a date in detail, including the role of Ukrainian collaborators who supported the SS. The Einsatzgruppen were basically SS and Ukrainian supporters. And on the back of the negative, he'd noted July 28, 1941, execution of the Jews by the SS in Berdichev fortress just outside. You can see Berdichev from Vinitsa is only about 90 kilometers. This is Einsatzgruppe C. By the way, Einsatzgruppe C, the third, there's actually 5, but for simplicity, we'll say there are 4 groups of Einsatzgruppen. The leader, Dr. Rasch, is actually in Germany, he'd be doctor. He's got a double doctorate, one in law, one in philosophy. They took very educated people to be the head of these groups. So a young soldier, what chance did you stand if you said, I feel bad about all this murder? You'd say, young man, I've got a PhD in law, I have a PhD in philosophy, etc., etc. So this photograph taken during the Holocaust in Ukraine shows this still unknown man, right? And Einsatzgruppe C were responsible for approximately 118,000 Jews being murdered. Before the SS arrived, I should tell you, in Berdichev, there are about 23,500 Jewish people. After they left, there were 15 left. So when they talk in the papers about genocide, this is genocide, right? When you go from 23,500, this is the Berdichev of Jewish, right? The Rebbe, the Berdichev Rebbe and such like. And in fact, using the modern techniques, facial recognition software, they managed to identify this shooter with more than 99% certainty. In fact, his family, the family of Jacobus Onen, when they see this, said, I think it's our uncle, and they take out the pictures, they put it through, I mean, the academics put it through facial recognition software, and basically they're certain it's him. He was a teacher, right? He's born in 1906, so at this stage he's about 35. He'd been a member of the SS since 1934. He was killed in action in Zhytomyr in 43, and you can see pictures of him, right? His marriage application here, you had to put in, you had to be allowed if you were in the SS to marry somebody, and who you were marrying, they would check into your background. Another picture of him. Why is this of interest to me particularly? This is my grandfather, David Rinberg. It's his British passport. In fact, when the Nazis came into Antwerp on the 10th of May 1940, my family, my father's family, had to run out Antwerp at the other side, managed to, it's a long story, but they managed to get on ships out of Belgium, came to England. My father was in the British Army. My uncle was in the Navy. My grandfather remained in London. And you can see he was born 16th of January, but he was born in a place called Berditchev. And I always wondered as a kid why we had no family on my grandfather's side, no family at all. Now I understand. And nobody ever spoke about any of these things when I was a kid. They didn't talk about the Shoah, the Holocaust. They didn't talk, if I'd ask my grandparents about Warsaw, whatever, as a kid. We look forward, we don't look back. I'd ask my father, what did you do in the war? We look forward, we don't look back. Nobody would speak about any of these things. And you can see why, because of the trauma. I want to respect the fact that there were people who lost their lives fighting to free Europe. And this is American Jews holding a service, actually in a castle that was formerly where Dr. Goebbels lived. It's a Purim service. You can see it's quite weird having a swastika on the wall and a Magen David, right? The parochet lying flat down, Sefer Torah and such like. And you can see the river. That's not the Ruhr, that's the Roya River, but it's the first Jewish service conducted. And they actually dedicated it to those who fell defending and trying to do what they had to do. And here in Bergen-Belsen, you've got this huge sign they erected. 10,000 unburied dead were found here. Another 13,000 have since died, all of them victims of the German New Order in Europe, and an example of Nazi culture. And I've wanted tonight to see Nazi culture, and this is where it led. Today, thank God, we've got the IDF, and an amazing, right? I've not checked this out, but I do believe it to be true. It comes from a good source. The granddaughters of ladies in the front here. This is just the most amazing. I've not checked this, as I say, but if it's 100% true, it's just an amazing. And the Israeli Air Force flew over Auschwitz in 2003. For those who don't know, when they were on the tarmac getting ready to take off, they were waiting for permission from the Polish government. And finally, the message came through from the Polish government, permission denied. And the colonel who was in charge at the time in the Air Force said, I don't care. And they took off and they overflew Auschwitz. But amazing that you know, they were denied the chance to fly over Auschwitz, but it happened. And what can we do but remember and learn and pay tribute to those who left us? Thank you very much.